Well, the House Oversight Committee's investigation into the Biden family's business dealings is really ramping up. We've heard stunning testimony in the past week, including claims of corruption, and we're told there is more to come. But through it all, Democrats and their friends in the intelligence services and tech companies have tried to keep a lid on the story. Journalist Emma Jo Morris was one of those who testified before Congress about the elaborate censorship operation of her reporting of Hunter Biden's laptop from hell by removing it from social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook. Now, the report, the original laptop report, was discredited and labeled Russian disinformation, not because the information was false, but because it was true. Have a listen to some of Emma Jo's testimony.
It is also now known that ahead of my reporting, federal agencies were priming social media companies to execute an operation to discredit it. According to internal documents released by Elon Musk upon his acquisition of Twitter, the FBI and other intelligence community members essentially directed the platform's censorship operation, in part externally by working with top management and in part internally by social media companies hiring eye-popping numbers of agency alumni. Journalist Michael Schallenberger reported, based on documents he obtained from Musk, that during all of 2020, the FBI and other law enforcement agencies repeatedly primed Twitter executives to dismiss reports of Hunter Biden's laptop as a Russian hack and leak operation.
Well, I am pleased to say that Emma Jo Morris, who is a political editor at Breitbart now, joins us here on the U.S. Report tonight. Emma Jo, welcome to the program. And first of all, I've got to ask, what was it like testifying before Congress about this? I mean, it's a pretty strange position for a journalist, surely.
Yeah, I mean, this whole experience over the last 3 years has been truly surreal in so many ways, and this was just another example of that. You know, I thought that, yeah, I was nervous a little bit, but I tend to, you know, I believe in God, and I tend to view the world in terms, not in terms of hierarchy between men, but of hierarchy between men and God. And so, you know, I look at congressmen, and of course I have total respect for them, but I don't see them as my betters insofar as I just see them as fellow human beings. So I was nervous, but, you know, I was able to, I think, take it pretty well. And I mean, the testimony apparently did well. People seem to have really liked it. I think that my view of my fellow man allowed me to kind of pull the move that I, again, wasn't expecting. I didn't plan it. I had no idea that it would track so well with the American public, but I bursted out laughing at one point when I read the claims of these spooks that my reporting was Russian disinformation. It's just beyond absurd, and I couldn't keep up the charade that we're all supposed to go along with here in Washington and in New York City, that we're supposed to take these people seriously. Like, they're not serious to me. Anyone saying that is just a clown.
Well, I mean, I think it was wonderful that you laughed at this, because the whole idea that this whole laptop, you know, full of damning information and pictures of Hunter doing God knows what, that somehow this was some elaborate Russian intel operation, it was laughable, and yet it was serious, because, you know, this is how the censorship industrial complex works. And just for our viewers here, we talk a lot about this, but as someone who's come up right against it, explain to us the way big tech and big government have colluded to shut down debate on, you know, the laptop, on COVID, on so many things.
Yeah, I mean, I only know really well, you know, how it worked in terms of my story, but I'm sure that you could just copy-paste this exact situation on any of the number of verboten topics that have been established by our I guess, establishment, but our security state. But, you know, what happened in this circumstance was that there was two methods of pressure being applied to social media companies from the intelligence community. One was external and one was internal. The external pressure was detailed in the Twitter files in horrifying detail, which was that the intelligence community would do a number of things, from, you know, emailing like Twitter, let's say, emailing Twitter to flag posts that they claim went against Twitter's terms of service, which, by the way, I didn't understand. I didn't know that that was a role of our law enforcement, but apparently they're here to trawl Twitter to make sure that MAGA chick 2323 isn't violating the terms of service. Yeah. So there was that, and then there was also, you know, creating, chats between the feds and members of management at Twitter. They had something called a virtual war room, they called it, which was an encrypted messaging service that they were using to communicate. They were bringing them to places like the Aspen Institute, which are these like pseudo-private, pseudo-public confabs, where they were doing dry runs of what might happen if there were to be a piece of news that would emerge around the time of October having to do with Hunter Biden and how to basically delete it from public consciousness. They were doing all kinds of things in collaboration with Twitter management explicitly. And then there was a second aspect of this, a second layer of it, which was that these social media companies hire eye-popping numbers of members of the intelligence community, obviously former, but they're hiring all these CIA guys, they're hiring FBI guys, they're hiring DNI guys, and they are just stacked to the teeth with former members of the intelligence community. And I had a line about that in my opening statement, and I'll be reporting on it more because I saw there was a lot of interest in that. So I'm going to be coming out with a story next week on that where we can go through. And it's all right there because there's a wonderful little social media company called LinkedIn. And all these guys are just right out there, Well, hi, former CIA, now head of security at Twitter.
And one of the things, though, that really fascinates me about this, I mean, you were with the New York Post when you reported on this, you're now with Breitbart, but so many of the big media operations, the New York Times, the Washington Post, all of these outfits here, which set the agenda. Back when I was growing up in the United States, they would have been appalled at the idea that government and companies were working together to craft the narrative. But now they seem to be all in on this. And can you tell me, why do you think it is that these outfits are so, happy to have the government basically tell them what to report?
Well, that's a good question. There was a weird, I don't know how familiar your audience is with American politics, and this is like kind of cultural, but for a long time, for all time, really, the Democratic Party was very skeptical of the intelligence community, very skeptical of the security state, very skeptical of military adventurism in the United States and everybody who was behind that. And around the time that Trump came up on the scene, that paradigm kind of shifted. And all of a sudden, the MSNBCs of the world and the CNNs of the world became #1 fans of the security state and of the intelligence community. And you see them on their air all the time. You have Jim Clapper and John Brennan, who are mainstays on these networks. And all of a sudden now it's, let's bring the former head of the CIA in to tell us the news, which is totally perverted. That is not at all what their role is. And for a long time, they are liberals, and for a long time, they personally held those beliefs, let alone what their professional role is. And around the time that Trump came up, you had the Russia hoax, which it is a hoax. It was something that the Russia collusion conspiracy theory was completely fabricated by the intelligence community. And then it was an operation that was basically executed on the American public. And the intelligence community started feeding them anti-Trump narratives. And all of a sudden, they became these strange bedfellows. And they've completely abdicated their responsibility as people who are supposed to be skeptical of these extremely secretive and extremely powerful organizations and people.
Well, I mean, they all say, oh, Trump's a great threat to democracy, but it seems like it's a pretty big threat to democracy when intelligence agencies are trying to shape an election, and then also when that election doesn't go their way, discredit the president. But finally, Emma Jo Morris, I want to ask if there will be any accountability for this at all, or do we have to wait to see if a Republican, whether Donald Trump or somebody else, gets into office at the next election and maybe makes good on some sort of promise to make these agencies pay for what they've been doing?
Yeah, I think that Congress is trying to investigate this. I don't know how much, ability Congress has. Like, this is something that is a deep and vast problem. This is a rot. And I think it will be maybe started by Congress. Maybe they can try to pass some legislation, although they don't even have the Senate. What are we talking about? I don't think much is coming out of Congress, other than maybe some investigations. And I think it's going to really take a president who is out for blood on this, because, and I mean that figuratively, of course, but I mean, you're going to need somebody who's ready to just clear out the FBI, who's ready to clear out the CIA. This is a level of corruption that I don't think we've ever seen. I mean, this is another level completely. There was always, after World War II and in the Cold War, when these intelligence communities kind of began to form, there was always this understanding among the people who worked there that you never, ever, ever turn inward. That would be a cardinal sin. And not only have they turned inward, but this is something that, as we're learning in multiple ways, has really become so pervasive and normalized. And you can't, I don't know how you salvage it. I mean, I'm not running for president, and I don't have the answers. This is above my pay grade. But I think it's going to take a president who is their boss to say you're fired.
Emma Jo Morris, thank you so much for your time and also for your testimony. You paint a very disturbing picture, so we'll be keeping an eye on this situation in the weeks and months and, I'm afraid, years to come. Thank you so much, Emma Jo Morris.